Culture eats strategy for breakfast. That's a quote from a gentleman by the name of Peter Drucker, who really is a management guru going back many, many years. But really, a lot of his philosophy, his thoughts, are still current with us, including this one about culture. A lot of times you have culture and it really is good or bad or different than somebody's used to. One time I worked at a community college district, and we had this chancellor, and she was pretty dynamic. She was, to describe her, you may not realize it, but I'm about 5'6". I pretend I'm 5'7", but I'm about 5'6". She was about 5'10" or 11. She had always 4-inch heels on. She had her hair stacked up. Her flaming red hair was stacked up with what they call a Beaufort hairdo. So that was 4 inches taller. By the time it was done, Patsy was her name. She would walk down the hallway. She'd tower about 6'6" to 6'7" at the very top, and she had these long strides. And I really felt totally embarrassed walking next to her, because there she is strutting down the hallway, and I was scurrying after her. I felt really kind of odd about that. She was a visionary, and ended up that she decided she would be my college president and the chancellor at the same time. So her and I developed a good relationship in the aspect of I could be the only one that could say tough things and get away with it without getting fired. So she sat there and she had all these visions, and one time she says, "David, this place over here, its culture is rotten to the core. I'm going to change this or die trying." Well, she died trying, because 4 years after she was hired, the Board of Trustees had probably the single most disruptive meeting I have ever seen in my life for a Board of Trustees meeting. Literally, the president has her gavel and she's hammering away on the desk and everything else, and then the vice president slings it on the ground. The head of the police department doesn't know what to do, so he kind of stands around and looks mean, and everybody kind of ignores him, and it's the most tumultuous meeting I've ever seen. And at the end of the meeting, she was fired, booted out the door, and the board is sitting there going around the room saying, "Do you want to be an interim chancellor? Do you?" And everybody is terrified to death to sit in that chair, because they saw the last one that said it. They just had their head chopped right off. Culture did lash out, and it did eat her strategy nonstop, and she was gone. You talk about culture. Culture can be something inside the organization, and you can't see it. You can't touch it. You almost can't even quantify it. We can talk about some of the different parts of it, but if you sit down and try to write it down, you'll never get all of it down. It really is an intertwining of the culture, the structure, the practices that are in place, and really the leadership. But by the time it's all done, the culture has been built into the system for a number of years. It is really, really, really hard to overcome. Some of your great transformational leaders, they have overcome it, but they only overcome it by being there for a number of years, or by getting a massive number of people out the door and making certain that they're gone before they come back and rise up and try to kill you in the process as well, like my experience was over there. Culture, it's a matter of the shared assumptions with how work gets done. You talk, you're friendly, you're open, you're withdrawn, you're political, depends on it is. The structure about who reports to who, that can change pretty much with just a piece of paper and a discussion and a memo coming out from the boss. HR practices, how it manages its talent, and leadership that wants to align that culture, structure, and the internal practices all together to make certain everything is in line. If you want to sit down and fool with the culture, you really need to pay attention to be there for a period of time, a minimum a year, before you try to address it. And you can only address it in the aspect of trying to bring change into the system. We'll be talking about that later on. But whenever you do, keep in mind that changing the current culture will have a kickback no matter how good of a leader, no matter how good of a manager that you really are. We talked about the aspect of what's out there. You'll have your strategy, and then it's going to come down and align itself. And then the leadership's going to go through and really look in the aspect of how you want to organize the culture and the climate on the inside of the organization. It is not a piece of paper. It is something real. And just when you think you have it right there, okay, it slips away and it's like sand dribbling out through your fingers, and you think you still have it, but it's all gone. Culture is a very difficult thing. It really is about how employees learn, and there's different aspects of the culture. We'll talk about 4 different types, and even then, I'm not certain I ever saw any organization that I've been in where it actually was one of these 4 types. Clearly, it was more of a mixture of them. So really, we talk about the aspect of the culture. It's the physical manifestations of it. You'll see all the big shots have corner office windows. Okay, you might have that. You might have this. You might have that. There's certain different aspects of it. There could be, they're all up on the 3rd floor up there, and they have bulletproof glass to make certain if anybody gets mad, nobody shoots them. You might have that as a culture. Or it might be a separate location. Or it might it's interesting. I worked once upon a time in a 5-college district. We had 5 colleges, and we have 2 sites, and then we had the district office site. And when somebody arrived at the district office, I work at the DO, everybody thought they'd arrived and everything else. I'm not certain that was the best place. I worked at both the college, I worked at the district office as well. I'm not certain I arrived, but I am certain that the traffic was harder to get to the district office than it was to the colleges. Anyway, but that being said, the next level after the physical manifestations of location, of the status of whatever it might be that you're at, there are certainly explicit stated values and norms. You'll have them in writing, and really at the end of the day, it will be in print saying what we believe in, what we value, and we've already talked about those things, but a lot of times those are things that are on the surface, but they're not deeply rooted in the organization. And there's things that you have to do on the outside, but really the basic assumptions are the core values of the organization. This is where you have to sit there, spend time in the organization, see who talks to who, see who doesn't talk to who, see what happens out over there, whether or not there's a silo, like all the marketing people only talk to marketing, then all of the manufacturing people only talk to manufacturing, and only the people at the top talk to each other. That is actually pretty common, and it is not a good thing. In my perspective, I think more communication the better, but that's me. I'm not in that organization, but I've seen it and I tried to fix it before. Employees learn a culture by looking on the symbols, those things that are on the outside. They hear stories about things that happen. I've told you some of the stories that are now part of the fabric of the South Orange County Community College District, as well as other districts, because the stories illustrate certain ways that things get done. There's heroes. There's even anti-heroes. There's people that sat down there. Once upon a time, we used to have somebody at one of the colleges, he wrote a blog, and the blog was critical of everybody, just about, including other faculty and administrators and everything else. Then he was an anti-hero, and he was saluted until the day that he died. As a matter of fact, after he died, they still saluted him. There's rites and rituals. There's organizational socialization, who you mingle with and who you don't. Really, culture is the way that the organization operates. It's written and it's unwritten. It's culture, it's structure, it's the practices, and leadership when they work together. At least usually. It didn't work together so much for Patsy because of the fact that she was a dynamic leader, and unfortunately, she stepped on too many toes that was part of the culture, and the culture reared back and bit her nonstop, and she lost the battle overall. So that culture that she thought was rotten to the core actually rose up and overwhelmed her before she overwhelmed them. One of the biggest things is having a vision that is shared by critical people within the organization. If you don't carry off the vision as to what you want to accomplish, if you are a lone person, even if you're a tough person, a strong person, nonstop, and feel you can carry the whole organization, the reality is when you have a shared vision, when you have a vision, you come out and say, this is what I want to accomplish. That shared vision, if you can get everybody else to share the vision yourself, then instead of you standing by yourself, you'll have the culture start to sit down and realize it can change for the better, and also get the people on board that are going to be part of the critical mass that's going to be needed to sit down there and make that cultural change. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. It does, but we'll talk about the aspect of how to change the culture, and it's a lot tougher than hiring a brand new person and think it's all going to change overnight, because it doesn't, and you have to make the change happen before the change happens you, and you're out the door watching with great interest what happened to the organization and why you're outside. Culture does eat strategy. for breakfast. Take care.